Chart update, 17th August data. Second wave, official notice. Hancock declares second wave clearly moving across Europe. Guess we'd better take a look. Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. Top 20 worst hit in the world, in comparison versus Southeast Asia and the Far East. The actual worse than figures have dropped as the Far East has scrounged up a few more deaths. We're all in this together, but not apparently with the same virus. Or is it that the world's richest nations are genetically vulnerable? How fortunate that they also have the pharmaceutical corporations to manufacture a vaccine. Full listing for 153 countries with over 1,000 cases and over 1 million population. Spare a thought for New Zealand, top in class but still in detention. And Australia also did very well but is still being punished. New York still out there as the poster child for the agenda, 44 times Hubei, 248 times Far East, a drop as the Far East has a few more deaths. The Cuomo virus rides, can't wait for the sequel. Italy, traditionally the first national chart, as the first European nation to be badly hit. And what on earth is going on? Did it suddenly get a memo? Add deaths? Not so much a second wave as a second lunge. The rest by region and Africa, Algeria. I'm sorry, did anyone die? Difficult to tell from the mortality line as roadkill at the bottom, 0.7% of overall mortality. Remember that, Hancock, we didn't all need to die. South Africa at 3.7 times Hubei in deaths isn't ideal, but is finally curling over again, in cases and now in deaths. How much of that was real? No idea. At 5% overall mortality, it was hardly a crisis. Zambia, like Algeria, must be sitting back and wondering at the mad Westerners. 0.6 death days, 0.3 times Hubei, near Far Eastern result, 0.4% of overall mortality. Maybe they'll be sending us aid packages. Barbados continues untouched, lucky them or diligent them. Their stringent measures and 8 hours of mask wearing rather taking the pleasure out of our annual trip to say hi. Maybe next year. I'd never imagined Brazil or South America as agenda regions, but what is going on here? You do know that contagions go up and then down? That oscillator going horizontal is priceless. Record stuck? False, 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 false. Canada finally to minuscule levels versus 2464 standard deaths, but is it going to join the USA and Belgium, get some deaths going for the second wave, 7th or 8th wave of fear and propaganda? Ecuador, and it managed to get a fairly hard hit at 6 times Hubei, but at 100 deaths per day, normalized versus 2464, it could keep that up forever and barely notice. Mexico, and like Brazil, it has that horizontal oscillator in deaths. Just dial in a desired number and keep adding till you get there. Sorry Mexico, don't believe you. Fraud until you prove otherwise. USA, and oh look, second wave, sort of, a little bit. Where are you going, Sparky? Want to play? Want to give your big pharma buddies the best shot? Home of the agenda and land of the not-so-free. Austria, and oh my god, it's a second wave of more no deaths. After the first wave of no deaths, it must be shocking to have more no deaths, but hopefully they'll get over it. Please notify Hancock and the media. Belgium, and that's more like it. Good clear signal, second wave. Absolutely not connected to being home of the EU HQ, worst hit nation in the world, host to summits to devastate us. We get it, or will. Croatia and another second what victim? Barely noticed the first what, so the second what is probably familiar, but getting equally short shrift. Denmark, wake up, there's a second... oh, never mind. Must be nice to have a chart that's just so blank. Finland, and sneakily they've camouflaged their deaths by colouring them white for the snow, or there aren't any. Is this what Hancock meant by a clear second wave? Thank God for that. France, another EU core agenda nation. But where's that second wave? Can't really make it out. You're not going to sit this one out, are you? Big Pharma needs you. Germany, Hancock, come on Fritz, where's your EU harmony spirit? Germany, I'm sorry, we can't take your call right now. Please leave your name and number and we'll get back to you. Greece and deaths, now you see them, now you don't. Too laid back for a second wave. Come back next year, or preferably not at all. Bravo to a non-agenda icon in Europe. Hungary, it must be so nice to not owe the EU loyalty. Deaths blank, a twitch, then blank again. So Hancock's an out-and-out liar. I'm shocked. Iceland, and obviously they're a bit unsure as to death, not breathing, flat and stiff as a board, unresponsive. Oh, so you didn't have any? 10, right. And none since April. Okay, good to hear. Ireland, so loyal in the first round at 7 times Hubei in deaths, but kind of lost their enthusiasm for it seems. No deaths showing up, lots of blanks, more second round on me than second wave it seems. Malta, 9 dead, back in April or May. Go away, not interested. Netherlands, the drug lords, surely they're up for another round? Apparently not. I'm ignoring the blue lines, obviously cases. Used to mean something, but all it means is not sick, but counting you anyway. Norway, shush, she's sleeping. Another one that didn't get Hancock's memo. Poland, and a rather persistent trickle of deaths. Is it second wave when you haven't finished the first wave? And at 30 to 50 deaths a day from the look of it, versus 24-64 per day from life, not really a big issue. Portugal, and very much like Poland, not a big player in round 1, did its bit at 3 times Hubei, but shows no sign of gearing up for round 2. Russia, deaths niggling and continuing, entirely not normal, but hardly going to lose sleep over it. It's not a direct player against us. Spain, one of the top players in round 1, one of the most oppressive with the most fraudulent numbers. No surprise to see that it's gearing up, with deaths ready for round 2. Sweden, non-agenda with no lockdown, but also without a normal chart. Far too long in declining. No sign of joining round 2 though. Switzerland, and they may be enthusiasts of testing, but deaths are few and far between. Another modestly loyal player in round 1, showing no sign of gearing up for round 2. Turkey, deaths trickling along, persistent, but at 1.6% of overall mortality, not a material issue. UK, and along with New York, the most fraudulent charts on the planet. Lockdown fail, massively sideways at peak, declining ever so slowly. Oscillator in deaths suggests a random number generator. But despite Hancock's determination to have round 2, no sign of it in deaths yet. No doubt with such false figures, they'll reveal it when they're good and ready. Australia, and it's finding some deaths, more indeed than in the original contagion. Disappointing. You'll note the cases rose from mid-June, but deaths waited to mid-July to appear. Fraudulent much? China, and no deaths showing up to provide a second wave, just the original, which is basically Hubei, obviously not on Hancock's mailing list. Indonesia, still quietly rising, deaths finally plateauing, but a tiny fraction of ordinary mortality, still busy with round 1. Japan, well, I'm not going to accuse them of being an agenda player. A second outbreak, but as before, a risible number of deaths, not even being close to a threat at 0.25% overall mortality. Korea South, and only the most sporadic signs of deaths since the original contagion was over. They and China were the earliest hit, yet none of that second wave, so clearly on the way. Malaysia, and did I miss something? 0.2 death days, 0.1% overall mortality, deaths clear for months barring a micro outbreak in June. Gosh, seems if you're not in the West, the agenda doesn't apply. Funny that. New Zealand, and look at that. They should be dancing in the streets, laughing at the West, celebrating sanity. Instead, they're under the domination of a PM who is crushing them with the agenda. So sad. Philippines, a long drawn-out affair at low levels, with a recent rise. Not threatening, but disappointing. Singapore, 27 deaths. Someone tell Cuomo that a city doesn't have to be the worst hit place on earth, unless you want it to be. Thailand, been there, done that, no deaths noticeable since April, 0.0% overall mortality. They should chain Ferguson to a beach there and force him to watch people at play, unless the government have banned that. Vietnam, for the longest time they had 0 deaths. Now they have an outbreak and they've decided to have some. 22. That'll be interesting to watch. India, another long slow haul, not material against 2464 standard deaths, curling over gently, 0.8% overall mortality. Guess we'll just keep watching. Iran, not a material threat, but disappointing that it didn't just die on them. The second outbreak, however, is no more serious than the first, though rather drawn out. Iraq, like Iran, had an early outbreak, looked good, but then a second got started. Is taking its time dissipating, but not a material threat. Israel, like Iran and Iraq, a first outbreak that looked sorted, and now a second one that's comfortably curled over at a modest level. Pakistan, a very nice though somewhat slow single contagion, though it may be a composite of a number of outbreaks, heading for oblivion. Excellent. UAE, a single, long drawn-out outbreak. I'm a bit concerned as to the increasing size of the spikes, but the gaps mean they're having days with no deaths. Minuscule level, not an issue. So there you have it. We should have been done with this by the end of May, but the UK government and other governments are determined to string it out. Until what? Well, we know the declared answer to that, don't we? Until the vaccine. And who still believes it will be voluntary? We've been doing some interesting work, but as you've noticed, haven't been active on YouTube. Not sure where a new home will be, or if there will be one, but for the time being I'm posting on Facebook, so by all means come and say hi, and friend request us or follow us, Andrew Mather and .Romader@virgin.net. That's it for now. I'm Andrew Mather, a 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, Andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.